please join me in giving a big Grand Rapids welcome to Dr. T. Colin Campbell.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for coming. I want to thank Sue and her group, the Wellness Forum, for having me here. It's a very nice opportunity, I think. It's my first time here being in Grand Rapids, as a matter of fact. I've been in a number of places in Michigan, but I was just thinking as I was walking across the street, it's the first time I've seen your wonderful city. And, of course, I'm looking forward to talking to you folks. I know that I think a lot of you are associated with the Wellness Forum. And I must tell you that Dr. Pam Popper, who I think is known to many of you, is a really dynamic lady in Columbus, Ohio, who started much of this organization and now is sort of taking it across the country. And I've been around the country quite a bit during the past year since the book came out, talking here and there. And there's one group of people that seem somehow to get in the audience from time to time, from California to New Hampshire to Dallas, Texas. I can't remember all. There's a group of people I know when they're there. It's the Wellness Forum people. They are an enthusiastic bunch, and I think they're very much on the right track as far as information is concerned. So it is indeed a pleasure for me to talk to a group that's sponsored by the forum. If we can get the lights down just a little bit. What I really want to talk to you about, of course, is about food, about health, about disease, about maintenance of health, prevention of disease. And the information that I want to share with you started with me, at least, formally, 50 years ago this August, when I went away to graduate school at Cornell University to do a doctorate in what turned out in those days to be animal nutrition. I actually went away to school, in graduate school at the time, to do a research project as part of my doctoral work, to figure out how to grow cows more efficiently so we could eat more of them and drink more of their milk. I had come from a dairy farm. I thought it was kind of neat that I could learn how to milk cows by hand when I was 5 years old. And little did I know that that was going to lock me into a childhood of work. But anyhow, that was the background I came from. A meat and potatoes kind of guy, drinking lots of milk, you know, the whole 9 yards. And so I went away to school at Cornell to embark on this idea that the great old American diet was where it's at. And specifically, I did my work, in fact, trying to figure out ways with my professors, of course. It wasn't solely my own, but did my dissertation specifically on the role of animal protein, you know, in creating health. I mean, somehow animal protein has become the awesome nutrient, the most sacred of all nutrients, as you might imagine. And whether you know it or not, or whether we know it or such talked about it, animal protein has almost been the bedrock nutrient for as long as we've thought about nutrition, at least in this country. And so I was enamored with the idea too, you know, really pushing animal protein, creating opportunities for people to get more animal protein, more total protein, of course. And as time went along, I got caught up in learning something rather different from what, in fact, I had been taught, the way I was raised, the way I did my original research, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. But as time went along, and I want to kind of share the story with you, in a sense, as a personal research journey. I mean, I didn't know that much about college when I went away to school. My dad only had a couple of years of education, actually, and I was the first one to go to college in my family. And so for me, it was very exciting to get in science and do these kind of things. And of course, believing in the way that we had lived our lives and the way we ate food and all of that. And when I got into my research program with my students, in science, we like to focus our hypothesis, as they say, you know, on a very specific question and then do the experimental research very carefully and understand it as best we can and, you know, sort of develop it that way. And what turned out, in fact, is although I started with a very specific idea, it just kind of blossomed. You know, you ask a question, you get some answers, it raises more questions than you started with, and then you just sort of keep asking more questions. And this one singular little question, very well focused, and I'll mention in a moment, gradually will start going like this. And so today, I would argue that nutrition is a concept, and as a practice, and as a science, really ought to be considered the premier biomedical science of the future. And I really mean that, because I've become impressed with what food can do insofar as its nutritional activity is concerned to maintain health and prevent disease. And that awareness, that enthusiasm that I now have for this idea of maintaining health, preventing disease, comes from doing the research and going like this, and then getting a big, broad picture of the expanse of the idea. Because in science, we tend to focus on one little thing at a time, and we work in our tiny little holes and never see much of what's going on around. And I also have gotten my views, as I'll share with you a little bit later in the lecture, in part from having been quite deeply involved for more or less 20 consecutive years at one point, being on some expert panel someplace, usually with the National Academy of Science, helping to write and develop national and international policy on diet and health, the kind of stuff that we hear as the public, and being involved in that process. So I did see, in fact, how scientific information that we tend to create in the laboratory, in universities and things like that, how that information then gets translated into public information, to create things like the dietary guidelines and create various incentive recommendations. So that's sort of the background. That was the background. My projector is now gone. Now it'll come back on. It better, yes. I know that this is Kathy, please. Gosh, I'm getting here problems with this. I don't know what's wrong here. Why did that come back? Is the technical? Is it back again? Okay, I'm going to have to be over on this side so I can punch that thing and look at it crossly when it's acting up. Okay, so let me just give you a little background. I'm going to share with you just a couple of ideas that you all know pretty well. I mean, you've heard this stuff. I call it some dots in the matrix, that we're concerned with in the present day. And I want to connect some of these dots because all these dots seem to be disconnected, but they are really connected. Let me just say this. This is this kind of problem we're living with today. A third of it, 2/3 of us are overweight, a quarter of us are considered obese, if you will. The youth or young people are especially vulnerable. We're kind of an overweight society to a great extent compared to what it was, 2 or 3 or 4 decades ago. We rely on drugs as a means of health. As the data here shows, some 5 years ago, half of us take one prescription drug a week to maintain our health or to prevent disease. Probably it's more than that now. And 80% of us, 4 of every 5, take some kind of medication. So we rely on drugs. And I'm going to have to, no, I can't get this here up. In any case, many people still want to rely on drugs as a means of health. I was telling an early audience today that there was an article in our local newspaper about 2 or 3 years ago, and of course I believe everything in our local newspaper, by the way. There was an article there that nonetheless was telling us that there had been a survey recently done saying that something like 77% of us in our country believe that drugs is the key